Okay, so I learned about this recipe. It's called Reshte. It's a stew. It's a basically it's a soup that's very, very thick. So we call it, I guess, a stew. It's a noodle stew, and it's very common in Iran. People cook it often, especially in the winter when it's cold. But it has a important significance for the Persian New Year, which is the first day of spring. It's called Nowruz, and people make rice and fish and this stew as well. The stew has a noodle in it, and the noodle kind of is the part that is important for the Persian New Year, because another word for noodle is thread, and so this noodle is supposedly, it extends the thread of your life. So people either use this noodle in this stew for the Persian New Year, or sometimes they put it in a special rice dish. But since I don't know how to make that rice dish, our family usually uses this noodle soup for Nowruz, for New Year's. Nowruz is the Persian New Year. It's on the first day of spring, which is March 20th or 21st. And for that, for celebrating the Nowruz celebration, people set a special table with 7 things on it that they happen to start with the letter S, and each is symbolic of renewal and rebirth of the year, renewing friendships, renewing, hoping, wishing for health and wealth for the new year. The family gathers around the table at the exact time that the New Year's spring begins and the New Year begins. So my mother taught me how to make this stew. However, I don't know if she'd learned from my grandmother, but my grandmother would make it. We would always go for the New Year's to her house, and she would make it. And I think I was around the kitchen probably and would see what she would do, but I really learned it more from my mom. I think I attempted to make it from a cookbook myself a few times, and then realized I needed her help. Yeah, so I learned it from her. So throughout the generations, I think how it's changed is it's a little bit easier to make. Now there are a lot of things in Iran that are prepared ahead of time. For example, when my grandmother made it, she would buy all the herbs. There are different kinds of herbs in this stew, parsley, dill, and she would have to chop them really finely, and there's a huge amount of herbs in the dish, and they'd have to soak the different beans, kidney beans and garbanzo beans and the white beans, soak them overnight, cook them. Those things now are far easier because they're already usually chopped vegetables, either frozen or dehydrated. And then the beans, mostly people use, not mostly, but some people use canned if they want to make it easier for them. So since I came to the States, I also sometimes have to use different ingredients that can't be found or are a little bit difficult to come across here in the States. So sometimes when I can't, the noodle that I use is actually called Reshte noodle. I was trying to figure out exactly what the ingredients are, but sometimes when I can't find that, you could use linguine. It has, yeah, it's a flour, wheat flour. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how it's different, but it definitely looks different from a linguine noodle. It's wider and kind of flakier, but you could replace it with linguine noodles. And then also the recipe calls for whey, and I don't usually buy whey, I just use sour cream instead. And then you could make your own beef broth, and I will use like a bone in there, but I will use some boxes of beef broth. So I've made some changes too because it's easier, or just sometimes you can't find things to use in it. I don't really have a story. I think I've, you know, when I first came here to the States, I made it a few times and it was really quite bad. And then I also attempted to buy, you could buy like a soup in a box from a Persian store. I made it, and that was, it was pretty good, but I just didn't, I felt like I'm cheating. So I did that for a few years, and you know, now I make the soup myself. Yeah. Well, the dish is really special because it just, you know, takes me back home, and I really try to also, for the Persian New Year, try to follow those traditions that I grew up with as much as I can so that my kids can become familiar with them. And I'm really happy that they like the dish. When they started asking for it, I knew that I had succeeded. Yeah, it's really special for me.
When did you start making it successfully?
Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe just in the last 5 or 6 years. What I really like about making this ash, or really any Persian dish, I would say probably 95% of Persian dishes start with sauteing onions, and so they're golden, and I just love that smell, and I love the sound, and it definitely takes me back to Iran. And my great-grandmother used to make like amazing golden onions that, I don't know, they're just really special. They were crispy. They almost turned out like chips. Still don't know how she used to make them. That's what I love the most about it. And actually, when you're all done with making the ash, at the very end, you also save some sauteed onions to put on the top, and you kind of decorate the top also if you want it to really look special. A lot of times in Iran, people make ash to share with a large group. So if you're going to someone's house, or a large group is getting together, you'll just have a big gathering with just ash and bread and herbs and cheese on the side, but really that will be like the main dish, and people will make humongous pots of ash because it's quite thick, so it's pretty filling. Yeah, a lot of times for big gatherings, people will make ash. They might even take a really big pot of it to like a picnic or camping or something like that. I'm really excited that Yasemin is going to learn how to make this dish, and I really appreciate that her school and her teacher has this assignment, so that, I mean, Yasemin is more and more in the kitchen, but I'm really happy that she's going to go from beginning to end with this ash, and she'll know one very important Persian dish. So thank you.
فقط برای دل ماهیا پر میزنه توی آسمون میبینه عکسشو تو آب آروم و خسته با چشم گریون تنها داره میگرده بین پر